Okay, Wade in Minnesota.
Oh, am I on now?
Yes,
You're on.
you are. How are you?
All right, cool. All right. So I was wondering if you guys accept the idea that if atheism is true, then objective morality doesn't exist.
What do you mean by objective morality?
Objective morality, what I mean by that is the idea that there are moral truths that hold independently of whether we think they do. So, for example, a moral objectivist would think that it's morally wrong for a man to torture an infant just for fun. It would remain wrong even if that baby torturer thought otherwise and killed everyone who disagreed with him.
So, let's say, would a moral objectivist think that it is definitely wrong to kill your own son?
Very likely. I would imagine that would be the opinion of most moral objectivists.
Okay, so does that mean that it would be wrong for I'm blanking on the name.
Abraham and Isaac?
Abraham and Isaac, yeah. It would be wrong for Abraham to even consider killing his own son when God told him so.
Well, it's not inherent in the definition, but a moral objectivist could accept that. I imagine there are a lot of atheist moral objectivists who think that.
Well, that was a terribly evasive answer.
Okay, so moral objectivism just says there are moral truths that hold independently of whether we think they do. By itself, this definition doesn't take a stand on which truths are objective. This is just a broad
I
definition.
think what most atheists would be with me on is that morals are always basically subject to what value you are trying to fulfill. But if we have a society full of people who reach a consensus on a value, there are objective ways to decide whether or not a certain action fulfills that value or not.
Okay, so this sounds like what Kant called the hypothetical imperative. The idea that where an ought is simply a shorthand for some purely descriptive meaning. In this case, it's describing what means to accomplish a particular goal. That's not the type of morality I was talking about.
Okay.
Okay, so in the English language, we have basically these two different types of the word ought or should. One is like the hypothetical imperative, like if you want to do well in school, you ought to study. In this case, you ought to study just means to do well in school, you need to study.
I follow you, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then there's the other type of ought, where the word ought is not a shorthand for some purely descriptive meaning, like you should not torture infants just for fun. Period.
Or kill your own son just because somebody tells you to.
Well, you could do that too, but though that's not inherent in definition. What I mean by prescriptive.
But I mean, it sounds to me like what you would present as objective morality is actually also a conditional, because it is basically if you want to please God, for instance, then you ought to do something like that, so and so.
No, that's not what I mean by prescriptive ought. By a prescriptive ought, sometimes it's called like a categorical imperative or something like that. I just mean the meaning of the word ought doesn't refer to something purely descriptive. It's not a shorthand for some purely descriptive meaning. It just means ought, simpliciter.
Okay.
Do you believe in that type of ought?
I'm not 100% sure I would go along with that.
So you're... Okay, the reason why I asked this is a few weeks ago, I kind of had a debate with an atheist on if God does not exist and objective morality doesn't exist. And
okay.
He
are you? I mean, I'm just curious. Are you a show host or someone who otherwise does this frequently?
No, I don't do this frequently.
Okay.
I have a blog, but.
Yes.
No, go ahead, Russell.
No, you.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that this is the sort of thing that can probably be overthought. I tend to think of morality as in a pragmatic sense. I am a member of a social species. It benefits me to, engage in behaviors that are by consensus considered to be beneficial not only to myself and to other people around me, because if the goal is a happier life, for myself, then it is rational to behave in ways that also contribute to the happiness of others. You know, in other words, me being a complete jerk to everyone isn't going to win me friends, and then I'll be alone, and then I'll be, you know, and it becomes a big negative cycle that way. So, in basic terms, I think that the problem comes when I hear theistic, and specifically Christian notions, when they talk about objective versus subjective morality, they've gone the other direction. They've made it way too simplistic. It's an either-or situation where there's this idea that you believe in a God, and therefore there is an objective morality, which is very handy because it's handed to you in a box with a big wrapper on it, and you can follow the rules. It's just following a list of rules. It's obedience to authority, basically, all of which completely ignores the question of, yes, but then what is my basis for considering the authority's notion of morality to actually be moral? So either you follow that notion of objective morality, or you subscribe to subjective morality, which in their terms just means pure amorality. You know, you're just going around, you randomly do whatever because you just don't give a shit, right? And that's, I think, you know, human behavior, you know, sociology can just point to, you know, the way we interact with one another. There are a lot of complexities involved. You know, there could, for example, be a perfectly excellent reason why a parent might need to kill their own child. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't necessarily happen to be simply because I, all-powerful space father figure, you know, and you know, commander of your life, dictates that you must do it. But what if you discover that your son is Timothy McVeigh?
Well, sure.
And you could stumble upon his plans before, you know, and what would I do?
Take a break to let Wade answer.
Okay. All right. Well, that's just trying to get it all out of my system.
So earlier you seemed to be describing a sort of descriptive morality, a sort of descriptive ought, where you're describing a means to accomplish some particular goal, like benefiting society. But if I'm interpreting it correctly, it doesn't seem like you believe in that prescriptive ought that I described earlier.
I think that would potentially be fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, somewhat unfortunate for me because, see, when I discuss it with an atheist for that, they redefine morality in sort of a descriptive ought. And so when people, in my experience anyway, when people like William Lane Craig say, you know, something like, if God does not exist and objective moral values and duties exist, they use that prescriptive sort of ought toward the unconditional outer category.
Yeah, but see, this is why I asked you what you mean by objective morality in the first place, because William Lane Craig plays this little shell game with the idea of objective, whereas Martin said, there is either absolutely true or false, yes or no, Boolean state of all actions are right or wrong, regardless of the values and the people that they're dealing with. Or there's a state of complete amorality where you could just rape orphans or whatever, and nobody can contradict you. And I think that that ignores the basic human state of being, which Martin was talking about earlier.
If you can name a moral precept that is either objectively good or bad, well, let's say if you can find a moral precept that you can look at and say, this is an objectively good moral precept, and yet no living person on this planet thinks that it's good. Everyone thinks that it's a bad moral precept, but it is in fact a good one. And if you study it on its own terms. Like if you have something that the consensus is that it's a bad thing to do, but it is in fact a good thing to do, then that would be perhaps an interesting launching pad for a discussion of, well, here's how we can distinguish an objective morality that isn't dependent upon the human condition, isn't dependent upon social factors.
Speaking for myself, I think it is a good idea for everyone to acknowledge that morality and ethics is some of the most complicated issues that philosophers have ever discussed. And there are a lot of different schools of thought all over the place, and Christianity or theism more generally is one contributor. But there doesn't seem to be any objective indication that it is actually the best way to approach morality or not. And so When I hear theists talking about objective morality, what I mainly hear is they say, I have decided on one particular set of rules, and because I say so, this is objectively true.
Well, perhaps I can help. I have a reasonable faith book here, and he says, to say that they're objective moral values is to say something is good or evil independently whether any human being believes it to be so. This is from 173 of his book, Reasonable Faith.
Okay, so you do believe that there could be an action that every single person on Earth believes is wrong, but it's actually right.
Well, it's theoretically possible, yes.
Okay.
But practically would be another matter, I guess.
Well, whether
So
it's actually
then,
the case,
what does it even mean that it's right?
Well, I suppose we could say that an action is right if it's morally obligatory to do that action, and an action is morally wrong if it's...
So, getting back to the Abraham and Isaac question, I mean, is God the decider of this right and wrong thing or not?
So that is not...
In your view.
Okay. First thing I want to say, that is not relevant to whether what my claim is true or not, because a lot of atheists agree with me that...
Well, I think we've answered your question in the sense that you're talking about objective morality, no, we don't accept that. Right,
okay,
Martin?
So
I would go with that simply because if the rule says one thing, but actually putting something into practice in real life demonstrates another thing, then perhaps the objective moral precept, isn't what it, it's
cracked up to
what
be.
it thinks it is. Yes, but good questions and a good topic, Dale. We really Wade. I'm sorry, not Dale.
Wade.
We appreciate it really very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
All right.
All right.
All right. See ya.
So we've got 15 minutes.